it all depends what you mean by conversion. For some people, that indicates a certain amount of pressure, or what is known as badgering of people. That is not our approach in anything at all.
The Legion now knows, through these 50 years of experience, that it's due to its firmness of purpose and its refusal to water down principle that it is where it is, that it's withstood in a great measure the present turbulence, for example, in the church.
In talking over the tea, some of the girls suggested, why could we not do that work also? So Mr. Duff was told, and he just jumped at it. Mm-hmm. He was so zealous. And he said, well, we can't discuss that now. We'll have to have another evening to discuss it.
I realised that if I want to do something for anybody, I know that I couldn't do them a better turn than bringing to the Legion of Mary.
I definitely feel that the finger of God has touched the Legion of Mary.
They're not a martyr for the cause, but actually enjoy it. It demands a certain amount of sacrifice, but when you give a little like that, I mean, what you receive back is 100-fold.
It has really given me so much. I mean, I felt it, in fact, when I was touring Europe, and practically the whole month I could not get in touch with any Legion, actually, even a presidium meeting and all this. And I felt so lonely.
All I could do was to set up 2 or 3 in the university, again in the parish, and move on. Now, if the Legion is what it should be, it must spread.
The 50th anniversary of the foundation of the Legion of Mary is a cause of joy, not only to Dublin, its place of origin, but also to Ireland and even to the Catholic world. These were the words written by the Irish hierarchy in a letter to Mr. Frank Duff to congratulate him on the anniversary of an organisation which he founded 50 years ago today. Many people will share in Mr. Duff's joy, but to many others this is just another celebration, and no particular concern is theirs. This indifference for their fellow men has not stopped the Legionaries, however, in their extraordinary work, a work which is carried on in many cases in the simplest way, but with the most far-reaching results. To those who care to look at the Legion as it is from the inside comes the realization that everything about it is uncomplicated, whether working with it, being helped by it, and even joining it to become world president, as Mr. Cummins did.
It's nearly 40 years ago since I became a legionary, and when I came I was just brought along by a friend. He told me he was a legionary. I didn't understand much about it then, or I didn't grasp much of what he was trying to tell me. But he did say to me, the same as I've often said to others, come along and see for yourself. And I went along, and the first thing impressed me was to find a priest and a number of men kneeling round our Legion altar in a room such as we have for most of our meetings, on their knees saying the rosary. I should, of course, been in the room before the prayers began, but my friend was slightly delayed, and we just got in shortly after the meeting started. I was captivated immediately by the atmosphere, and certainly by the altar, which represented immediately to me a sort of presence of Our Blessed Lady. From my boyhood I had been taught by my parents, my teachers and priests to have a devotion to Our Blessed Lady. And I suppose I tried to do it in my own tin pot way as well as I could. But this for me seemed to be a new approach, something that certainly evinced from me more than I had previously given.
There's an ancient Chinese proverb which says that a journey of 1,000 leagues begins with a single step. And now it can be said that that journey of 1,000 leagues has indeed brought the Legion into the depths of ancient China. The story of the Legion's birth and growth in China, and how well the mission was accomplished there, is best known to Father Aidan McGrath, the Columban father who has given up so much of his life to the resistance of the communist Goliath.
Well, I went to China in 1930. I'm a native of Dublin, and I left Dublin not knowing anything about the Legion, never heard of it. And I was sent up to a very small parish, about 700 miles in from Shanghai, without a church or without a house. And very soon I realized I needed something, people to help me, and I started my own, if you like, Catholic action, and let's call it Father McGrath's folly, because folly it was. It lacked everything that the Legion of Mary now
In what sense?
has. Well, not enough prayer, not enough detailed rules, not enough training, and no specific work, so that it became chaotic, like so many. However, my bishop wanted me to start the Legion of Mary. Bishop Galvin, God rest him, I never knew anything about it. I didn't think it would work because mine had failed. My thing had failed.
Yes.
And this miraculously worked. I had 6 groups in my little village when 4,000 Japanese soldiers walked into the town in 1938. Before the Japanese War, I was the only one to protect the women and children, and I was busy protecting them when my 6 groups brought me in about 700 wonderful Catholics. They did everything, selected them, chose them, taught them, and so on. And that opened my eyes to the fact that this was something marvelous. I was expelled then by the Japanese. They wanted to get rid of me anyway. I was 2.5 years away from that parish. That parish without church, without rectory, without teachers, without sisters, without priests. And I decided because I was not there, that was the end of it. And of course, I pined away really, worrying about the place. And when I was allowed back in 1944, when De Valera actually kept Churchill out of the ports, they decided I was neutral and they let me back. And to my amazement and certain embarrassment when I got back to the town, I found the parish was running smoothly without me.
Really?
That's right. They decided what every child knows today, that they were the church.
Yes.
And I was shattered by it. And of course at that moment I decided no priest can possibly be without an organization such as this. And I was sick and I went home for furlough. And while I was home, Archbishop Riberi, who had met Edel Quinn in Africa, was changed to China. 1948 when he got there, it was only 1 year before the communists would take over. He knew very well every priest, brother and sister would be put out. And he said, we need something that would develop people like Edel Quinn. Mm-hmm. And that thing is the Legion. He looked around for it, couldn't find it, except for my 6 groups. And he got me released from my parish and my other work, and asked me to start in the universities of China, the famous Aurora University with the Madames of the Sacred Heart looking after the women, then up to Haute Études in Tientsin, where the Jesuits had the university there, and the SVD in Peking, the Foreign University, which is now in Formosa. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, in 1 year we had 1,000 presidia, mostly students,
really?
Young students, superb. In 2 years we had 2,000 groups, and you're not surprised that when the communists eventually caught up with me and everybody else, and they found that putting out the priests and sisters did not solve the problem. Mm-hmm. Closing the churches and schools didn't solve the problem, that the problem was solved by the natives themselves who were keeping the church alive.
Could I, just before you go on, ask you there, you said we had 1,000 and then we had 2,000. Now that's very easily said. How on earth did you go about getting the 1,000?
Well, of course I didn't, Nola. All I could do was to set up 2 or 3 in the university, again in the parishes, and move out. Now, if the Legion is what it should be, it must spread.
Yes.
And that's what it did. And to my amazement, when I came back after 1 year, they caught up with me in Chongqing, you see. I kept ahead of them all the time, hopping and flying over them, and then when I couldn't go anymore, I stopped and I waited for them. Thought they would arrest me, they didn't. They allowed me back to Shanghai, and as I say, to my amazement once again, I found that the Legion had developed itself.
What sort of work did you do?
Everything conceivable that the priests and sisters would have done if they'd been there. And at this time they were going into prison and being expelled and so on.
Yes.
The ordinary parish work, as you know, the looking after the sick and the poor, and keeping the children instructed and so on, and getting the people to say their prayers. If there were no masses, well, to carry on, keeping their faith and so on. And doing even the social work, like helping the dropouts and so on, to keep people to be good, with good civic spirit and so on. But the communists didn't like this. They don't like that individuals do that. They want to say the state does this, you see. And therefore putting out the priests and sisters didn't solve the problem, and they suddenly discovered that the Legion of Mary was what they called the public enemy number one.
Really? Now, how did they set about capturing the enemy?
Well, they tried to use it first. They thought that they could control it and frighten it and use it as a spearhead to develop the native church, what they call the independent church, national church, independent of Rome and so on. But of course that failed 3 times, and they were furious. The legionaries just wouldn't give in on it, you see. Priests and legionaries were working together insofar as they could. Then eventually it was proscribed. We weren't even allowed to sing the Legion hymn or anything else. You know, it was quite a joke, the whole thing. Weren't afraid of soldiers, weren't afraid of anyone else, afraid of the native who had something within him, a courage and a faith, and was determined even to go to prison for it.
The Legion, now so considerable, had the most humble beginnings. It was not a thought-out organization. It sprang up spontaneously. There was no premeditation in regard to rules and practices. A suggestion was simply thrown out, an evening was fixed, and a little group came together, unaware that they were to be the instruments of Providence. Among that group was Sister Gemma Galgani, who is now with the Sisters of Cross and Passion and resident in Chile.
Well, the first thing was I met Mr. Duff. I went up to the Myra Hall to join the pioneers, to get the pioneer pin. And after a little talk with Mr. Duff about the pioneers, I got the pin, and then later he asked me to come to the council meeting of the pioneers, which took place once a month. And at that pioneer meeting, the men, it was very interesting. The men spoke about their work. They had been visiting the Dublin, the Union, as it was then, and the work giving tobacco and papers to the old people, and I thought it was very interesting. So usually after these meetings we used to get a cup of tea for the members, we girls, and in talking over the tea, some of the girls suggested, why could we not do that work also? So Mr. Duff was told, and he just jumped at it. He was so zealous, and he said, well, we can't discuss that now, we'll have to have another evening to discuss it.
Yes.
And it happened to be, that was on a Sunday, and it was on a Wednesday that we fixed in the same room where the St. Vincent de Paul hold their meetings, that we fixed the meeting. But I don't know how it was, but one of the girls, though it wasn't planned, when we arrived in, the table was there with a cloth and a lady's statue, and 2 candles, and 2 balls of flowers, and all sat round the table, and the rosary, we said the rosary, prayer to the Holy Ghost. And then we discussed what we would do.
Yes, and that was the first meeting.
And that was the first meeting. And then we were sent off on tours then, particularly the Union Hospital. When it did start, it was called the Little Association of Our Lady of Mercy.
Can you remember what the atmosphere generally was to the Legion when it started, say, after about 6 months? Can you remember what the church attitude to it was and what the general attitude of the people was?
Well, everybody was very interested because it got so, each member brought somebody else, and it got so big it had to be divided.
Yes.
And I think they went to the north side of the city then for another meeting.
Was there ever a sense of excitement that it was turning into a...
No. Never thought it was going to be what it was.
So you were really rather surprised today, 50 years later.
Oh, yes. I was really surprised some years later when I heard the name Legion of Mary. I was a nun then, and I just happened in a retreat house to hear them talking about Legion of Mary, because they had stopped writing to me, and I didn't know how it was progressing.
Yes.
And I asked, what was that? The Legion of Mary, the name seemed to appeal to me. Oh, they said that's an association that started by a holy man in Dublin.
The holy man in Dublin spoken of by Sister Gemma Galgani is, of course, Mr. Frank Duff, whose quiet dynamism was responsible for the special spirit which belongs to the Legion of Mary alone. There are many reasons why people join an organization, but when speaking of the Legion of Mary, the reasons are always the most simple, as we see with Dr. Lorne O'Brien, a member for many years, and the first editor of Maria Legionis.
I remember the occasion, actually, when I decided to become a legionary. I was adjudicating at a drama festival organized by the Legion. I was working alongside a very distinguished drama critic of that time, Larry Byrne, better known as Andrew E. Malone. And we were sitting up in the Morning Star, in the little theatre in the Morning Star, looking at a play. And there was a legionary on duty on the door, and I saw a very tough woman coming in from the Sancta Maria, barging right in and smacking this girl in the face for refusing her admission in the middle of an act. And I pondered over this afterwards, and I said, you know, there's something here. If this young girl, who could have been having a good time downtown, was prepared to stand at the door and take that sort of punishment in the interests of the down and outs of Dublin, I thought that I should be doing something. And it was that really that prepared me for admission to the Legion of Mary.
Long before the social apostolate became the in thing among modern activists, the legionaries who found their inspiration at a deeper source had discovered the true significance of the cup of water given in my name. Is it for this reason, perhaps, that people like Margaret Ford decide at the age of 22 to give up so much of their lives totally to Legion work?
You live in Regina Church?
I live in, yes.
Why do you do this? Why do you work in Regina Church?
Well, going back to the time before I joined the Legion, I was very interested in social problems, and I wanted to do something constructive. And to me, the Legion was the answer to this. I was particularly interested in the sort of work that's been done at Regina, and so I decided to come up here and to work full-time. I felt this was the way to get to know the work, and I found that is the way to know the work. You know,
what I'm really saying to you is, why are you a legionary?
Because for me as a Christian, I needed to fulfill myself. I wanted to help my neighbour in a constructive way. I'm the type of person that needs to be organised before I can do anything. And the Legion was the answer.
Do you ever hesitate to tell people that you are a legionary? Because after all, you are also human, and sometimes people can be quite upsetting in their reaction.
No, I've never experienced any difficulty so far.
Mm-hmm. Do people, what sort of things do they say? People, I mean now, not your friends, but strangers, when they hear suddenly that you are a full-time member of the Legion?
First, I think they're amazed at my age to be a full-time member. They think it's very uncommon for somebody so young to give so much time. But sort of when they get to know me, they appreciate that, you know, I want to do this, and I'm not a martyr for the cause.
I owe my life to the Legion of Mary as regards prayer.
There are people in this world who are more than ready to criticize everything, more especially if the motivation is religious, and the Legion, of course, has its critics. One of the most severe criticisms made of the Legion is that its members intrude in the private lives of their fellow beings. But to those who care to find out, nothing could be further from the truth. And you only have to meet a lady like Mrs. Dale to realize the true meaning of Christian love.
It's joy, I couldn't describe it, because it's a life that you'd have to know it. Because when I found I hadn't a mother, my mother always told me the mother of God is a sinner. And I believed her. And I said to her,
God bless her, she said she's just an ordinary person, just like you and me, and sinned. And I always believed her, you see. So until I used to study myself, read little books and pamphlets I used to get in my groceries, unknown to anyone, and I was reading them a lot in work. And I was reading on about Our Blessed Lady, and it was a different term altogether. Of course I couldn't say it at home.
Also among many people today who do not know it, or for whom it is a silent rebuke to their own consciences, the Legion of Mary has been the object of cynicism and the butt of many barbed jokes. And to people like Sam Hughes, these must sometimes be very hard to take.
I think the Legion is misunderstood to the point where it is regarded as something extraordinary in the religious sphere. And the Legion, in actual fact, is, and has always been to me, certainly, just normal Catholicism. If you like, full-blooded Catholicism, but nevertheless normal Catholicism. And on that basis, the Legion, the idea of looking at the Legion from a, if you like, strictly saintly viewpoint, it is nothing of the sort. It's composed, to my mind, and I've worked with men who are in Presidia, branches of the Legion, where the Presidium was completely composed of some men from the docks, some unemployed men, some from very high intellectual positions, all under one Presidium, doing exactly the same work, each contributing his own part. And this, to my mind, is one of the strong features that attracted me to the Legion, that it could attract people from all intellectual levels and from all walks of life, and they could all be united, if you like, in one ideal. And this ideal was centered on the faith, if you like, looked after by Our Lady, and it wasn't an attitude of, if you like, of what you might call, well, for want of a better term, Holy Joeism.
Yes.
You know?
We're talking about Holy Joeism. People will say it, and they will say that there is an atmosphere of Holy Joeism in the Legion. Do you think that the Legion reason says do enough to get rid of this idea?
Well, I think so. I think they do, because it's a misconception about religion. I think that's abroad. It's not. It is not. You will, when you come into the Legion, this misconception goes out the window, because you'll find people in the Legion who are intensely practical people, who have a business-like approach to what they're doing, who are prepared to go to great lengths to do what is required of them in the interests of the Church and Our Lady. And I mean, what more is wanted of a person? The Holy Joeism is a person who is basically inactive and has a complete misconception of the faith. And for that point of view, it's just not.
Well, I absolutely agree, because I've met some of you now, quite a few of you, and the one thing that strikes me is the happiness and the absolute normality of everybody. I have seen absolutely no sign whatever of Holy Joeism. But I wonder if there's enough publicity for people outside who don't actually come in to you and look for you. If you yourselves make enough effort to let people see just the great work you are doing.
Well,
you seem to some publicity.
We do, yes, and in a way, rightly so.
Each day brings fresh news of the Legion's growth and its penetration into new areas. Each year sees new countries added to the long list. How, for example, did Maria Suteliza first hear about the Legion in the Philippines?
Well, after my graduation from the university, a Franciscan father introduced it in our parish. I find it so funny now when I remember that, because my first impression of the Legion was that it was a kind of a pious organization, and just then we were preparing for a reception and ball, and I had my gown hung up, and he came and invited me. And in fact, in the first conference, the first thing I asked my brother to ask for me, I couldn't even ask myself if legionaries were still allowed to go on such dances and such all things as those. And of course, I didn't know anything about it. And it all started that way.
I see.
And there was a meeting just then. I attended the meeting. And without knowing it, the next week I was there. The following week I was there. The next week I was there. And I was trying to preside over that presidium right away.
And how much actual active work does the Legion do in the Philippines?
We cover a lot of apostolic program of works, but we concentrate chiefly on home visitation.
Yes.
With the different purposes, especially to have the people know.
Now, would this home visitation be to all houses of all denominations, all religions?
Yes, we try to cover all.
Yes. What about recruiting? Is it very difficult in the Philippines?
Well, as of now, it's really difficult because they usually are working people and most are students. But at any rate, we still do. In our home visitations, we include recruiting, of course, but we usually get auxiliary members instead of active ones.
How does the Legion in Ireland compare with the way it works in the Philippines?
Also very different. Perhaps because the needs are also different. Look, in the Philippines, even if we are known to be a Catholic country, we have more lapsed Catholics, sad to say.
I see, yes. So the difference in the work is really in the sense of the apostolic work.
And then, of course, we don't have so much of these club activities that I see around here.
Yes. In what way do you mean that?
This organization of clubs. I was in a club for disabled children, retarded ones, and all that. We don't have that kind of work there. What apostolate to the crowds were just beginning.
Yes.
And then this street rescue work, which is really heroic, I say it here. We could also do that there because we have such cases. Also.
You don't do that at all in the Philippines?
Not yet. Not yet. All that we do is visit the bars, get in touch with the girls. And
What does the Legion mean to you personally?
Well, if you ask me, I think I could say the Legion is my life.
In what way would you describe that further?
It has really given me so much. I mean, I felt it, in fact, when I was touring Europe, and practically the whole month I could not get in touch with any Legion, actually, even a presidium meeting and all that. And I felt so lonely.
The Legion slowly grew and spread, sinking deep roots in its home soil before venturing far afield. It has been ready to help with every form of apostolic work throughout the world, and at the 551st meeting of the Concilium, or governing body, which took place in Dublin on August the 15th last, members received reports from envoys throughout the 5 continents. And attending that meeting was the first envoy, Mary Duffy.
In the early 1930s, perhaps 1933, Miss Alice Carthy, as she was then, wrote an article in the Commonweal, an American magazine, in which she described the work that the Morning Star was doing for the down and out men of Dublin. That article was read by a prominent Catholic layman in San Francisco, Mr. Oliver, and as at that time the United States was suffering from the effects of the depression of a few years previously, and as there was a great deal of unemployment, Mr. Oliver was intensely interested in the welfare of the poor people, especially the down and out men of his own city. And when he read about the work of the Morning Star, he wrote to the Commonweal, but they told him the article had just been supplied to them, and they suggested that he would write to Miss Carthy. Now, Alice Carthy put him in touch with Mr. Duff,
And Mr. Duff tells us that he wrote a 7-page letter to Mr. Oliver, and Miss Celia Shaw, who was one of the early members of the Legion of Mary, supplemented it with a 3-page letter. And Mr. Oliver went to his Archbishop with this information about the work that was being done here in Dublin in the hostel, but the Archbishop would not permit him to open a hostel in San Francisco at that time. He wrote again to us, and he said that he was 80 years old. He was very anxious to see this set up in his lifetime, and perhaps if we would send someone to San Francisco, that person might be able to give further information to the Archbishop and win him over. And in 1933, Celia Shaw went out for a period of a few months, but by the time she reached San Francisco, the Archbishop had died. However, she described to Mr. Oliver the work being done in the hostel. She explained that it was a work of the Legion of Mary, but that it was only one of their many works. Mr. Oliver became still more interested in the Legion of Mary, and after Mr. Shaw's return to Dublin, he wrote to Mr. Duff again and asked that a person be sent out, some member of the Legion of Mary, who would devote perhaps a couple of years to introducing it into that country. So in 1934, I was asked by Mr. Duff would I agree to go, and I did, and I left Dublin on the 3rd of June 1934 and arrived in New York 6 days later.
And you stayed for?
I was appointed at the outset for a period of 3 years, but in the interval the World War II broke out and it was not possible to get home, and I stayed for 12 years.
Like other envoys, part of Mary Duffy's work was to visit people who had perhaps, for one reason or another, lapsed from the church. How did those people react to an uninvited guest?
Invariably, the reaction was kindly enough. In many cases, they were very happy to be contacted, and perhaps only waiting for the word of encouragement, either to have a marriage set right or to get back themselves into practice of the faith.
Is it ever difficult for a legionary to approach someone like that? We tend to think of the other person's reaction, but I wonder how difficult is it for the legionary, because it is quite a hard thing to do.
Well, it is. It's never really easy, and I suppose if we were depending on our own effort, we just wouldn't do it at all. It's first of all, I think the discipline of the weekly meeting and the spiritual atmosphere at that meeting that really gives courage even to the most timid to do a work that is definitely a difficult work.
But the Legion of Mary is so vast today, has it perhaps become almost impersonal for this reason? I asked Monsignor Falls, who is the spiritual director of the Sonatas in Philadelphia, if he thought this had perhaps happened in America, and if the Legion had lost contact with the people for this reason.
No, I think the opposite, that it's one organization in the church that is continuing contact with the people, and more as time goes on, I think we'll do more of this contact, because we are beginning to increase in numbers again. We had a period of recession right after the Second Vatican Council, when so many thought that we should downgrade Our Lady. They thought that the Council wanted us to do this, that the ecumenism should substitute for the convert apostolate. These being two features of the Legion of Mary, there was a period when our membership started to decline. Our recruiting wasn't as active as it had been, but we're on the uptrend again.
Another of the criticisms of the Legion of Mary is that it is old-fashioned and needs to be updated, that it is too rigid in its discipline, and that it is not ecumenical in its devotion to the Blessed Mother.
These accusations or these suggestions for change, of course, are based on two false assumptions: that the Second Vatican Council wanted us to downgrade Our Lady, and that the ecumenism should supplant the convert apostolate.
Because the Legion of Mary is a lay apostolate, it is sometimes said that perhaps the priests and indeed the hierarchies of different countries might possibly be against it. I put this question to Father O'Flynn, the World Spiritual Director of the Legion of Mary, and I asked him if perhaps priests might even be a restraining influence on the Legion of Mary.
Well, no, because of course you've got to understand the primary responsibility for souls rests on the bishop of a diocese. Consequently, he is the overseer, he has the right and the duty to superintend all apostolic activity. And the Legion, as you know, is very strict on obedience to bishops. That's quite clear from the handbook. We have no difficulty there whatever. Priests and hierarchies in general to the world have been most helpful. And here in Dublin, while we're on the subject, I must say that everybody from the Archbishop down has been simply more than helpful over the years in my experience.
But in the beginning, Father, it was said that there was a certain amount of opposition from the clergy.
Well, of course, you see, in the beginning, like the Legion was terribly new. It was a very new thing to have lay people doing sort of the work of a priest, doing visitation, doing street contact work, and so on. It was previous to the Legion. This was confined completely to priests, and naturally, the priests, possibly the hierarchy, was slow to accept it until it proved itself. But while on that subject, I must say that straight away there was tremendous support right from the start from many distinguished priests, from Father Torr, who was the first spiritual director, from Father Creedon and from Father Dennis O'Flynn, all who were men of, Father Dennis O'Flynn of course later, all of whom were men of outstanding ability and who gave every moment of their time that they could to Legion activity. The Legion simply couldn't have existed without them, and without Father Torrey and Father Creedon and many other men like Father Robinson, Monsignor Padraic, others, it simply couldn't have got on without them. Mr. Duff would be the very first to insist on that. And while we're on the subject, I would like to acknowledge how tremendously helpful the religious orders have been to us, as well as the diocesan clergy. We've got tremendous service from them over the years. It would be very wrong to think that priests didn't give tremendous help to the Legion, really.
What about the feeling that ecumenism is in conflict with conversion? Now, the Legion is...
You mean that ecumenism is in and conversion is out?
Well, the Legion, that's putting it very strongly, but the Legion is involved very much with conversion. So would you say there was any conflict then with the ecumenical movement?
If ecumenism, to my mind, if ecumenism is properly understood, there's no conflict whatever. I like to regard them as two parallel movements. That, of course, isn't strictly accurate because at a certain point they would meet, but two parallel movements, and if the decree on ecumenism and the directives are studied, that will be seen to be true. It would take too long now to go into to develop that point. But conversion, of course, must always be primary work of the Legion, just as it must always be a primary work of the Church. You can't forget the command, going therefore teach you all nations.
Every organization has its headquarters where its more detailed work is carried out, and the headquarters of the Legion of Mary are in Dublin. Mr. Murray, we're standing at the moment in the room where the officers of the Concilium hold their monthly meetings. Now, in front of us here is an altar. Would you tell me something about it, because I know that it's a fairly important altar?
Yes, we regard it as a most precious relic of the past, because it was the altar around which the first meeting of the Legion of Mary was held on the 7th of September 1921. The setting up of the altar was a spontaneous act on the part of one of the first legionaries, a young girl named Alice Keogh, who later entered religion and became a sister of the Assumption, and who died in Canada on the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Legion. The altar is a statue of Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception model, with the hands extended as in the distribution of graces, flanked by two vases with flowers and two candlesticks.
Now, are these original, these vases and candlesticks?
These are the original candlesticks. The vases are glass. They're a reproduction of the originals, which were destroyed during the early years. The vexillum that you see was the first model made when that was introduced.
Now, will you explain to me what the vexillum is?
The vexillum is an emblem of the Legion of Mary. It is a metal based on a marble globe and a marble base, or an onyx globe and a marble base. The metal part has at the top a replica of the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove, and then there is a crossbar with the words Legio Mariae. Beneath that there is a disc, a replica of the miraculous medal, which is complete front and back.
Yes.
And then beneath that the globe, which represents the world. The symbolism being the distribution of graces to souls through Our Lady.
And do you use this in all the different areas all around the world? All the different
in every Legion of Mary meeting, whether it is a presidium, which is the local unit, or a council meeting, this emblem is always used and placed in front of the statue.
Yes. And there's a little bell there which is intriguing me, because it's in the case with the statue and the vexillum, and I'm wondering what significance it has.
Well, the first president believed in the use of a bell to maintain order. So Mrs. Kerwin used that bell at the meetings, but it is not a normal part of Legion equipment.
I see. Is that little statue behind also in a glass case? Has that any special significance?
It has. That was used by Edel Quinn, whose cause has been introduced by the Archbishop of Nairobi, East Africa, for canonization when she was engaged in organizing the Legion as an envoy throughout Africa.
Perhaps the most common thing said against the Legion is that it does not give material aid to those in need. Now, the explanation for this is quite simple. It derives from the origin of the Legion itself, which sprang from the St. Patrick's Conference of the St. Vincent de Paul Society, a society where the object, as everybody knows, is to give material aid. It's quite natural then that the Legion at the beginning would not wish to take up the same work. In fact, it came into existence through a realization of the fact that there was need for a different kind of service, a wider kind of human uplifting. And I asked Tom Doyle, who joined the Legion of Mary in 1930 and has since then been doing visitation work and hostel work in the Morning Star, if there was much change in the Morning Star since the early days.
In the early days, there was no such thing as social service that's given to men now. The type of man that the Morning Star catered for was not entitled to any unemployment assistance or other social benefits that men have now.
Yes.
They were entitled to no weekly allowance.
Mm-hmm. What is the reaction of the men to you in the Morning Star generally? Do they feel that they owe you something, or do they feel a little bit aggressive towards you?
Well, most of them, I say, are quite pleasant with me.
Mm-hmm.
There may be times with drink and things like that that men would be aggressive, but generally not.
Mm-hmm. You're a man who has given up practically your whole life to the work of the Legion of Mary. Why did you do it in the beginning?
Well, I suppose I just got taken with the Legion when I joined it, realised I had found something very good. As time went on, I realised that this was something that was a kind of life that I hadn't thought about before.
How did you first hear about it in the early days?
Brought in by a friend. I was in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, and my president was also helping with the Legion. There were no men in the Legion at the time.
Yes.
But we helped the Legion to do some of the Legion work.
Such as?
the Pickens, the Medical Mission,
Yes.
and the Metropolitan Hall.
Yes.
They were two proselytizing places.
Yes. Now you said there were no men in the Legion. When you joined it, were you one of the first bunch of men?
Well, a number of the Presidio, when I joined the Morning Star, as it is now,
Yes.
we weren't affiliated to the Concilium because there was no men in the Legion. But we met around the same Legion altar, and we said the Legion prayers, and we followed the Legion rule. And later, when men were affiliated into the Legion, our Presidium came into the Legion.
What do you think of the young people today who are joining the Legion?
Well, we meet some very, very good intermediates. Trouble is that we haven't enough.
Why do you think you don't have enough?
Well, when you look around at the meetings, there's not enough of young people. We lose a lot of them. About 18, 19, 20, they leave off coming up to the exams, and even when they start work, many of them are doing night study, and many of them won't give the time, I suppose. But on the other hand, there are some very, very good ones.
Now you probably don't have all that much time in your hands, because when you're finished with your work in the Morning Star, you must be pretty tired. Do you ever now actively try to recruit yourself people for the Legion?
Only people that I meet, you see, in the work. My whole life is taken with the Legion, you see.
Yes.
And therefore, everyone that I speak to is something in connection with the Legion.
Yes.
And I haven't the opportunity to go around from house to house or meet people on the street to tell them about the Legion.
Well, you said only people that I meet, so it means that when you actually meet someone, are you always thinking, well, this would be a good member, or how do I ask?
Well, I realise that if I want to do something for anybody, I know that I couldn't do them a better job than bring them to the Legion of Men.
And how do you go about explaining to them? We'll say you come across somebody in your work and they don't know very much about it, and you discover this. What do you say to them?
Well, I try to tell them about the Legion, about what it is.
What is it?
I suppose Our Lady at work. I've always found that if I tell anybody about the Legion, that I must tell them about Our Lady's connection with the Legion. That to a certain extent it's not just doing of any particular kind of work, but it's not to a certain extent Catholic action. It's certainly not social work, though they may do social work in Catholic action, but it's the Legion of Mary which is different than the other organisations.
Closely connected to the heart of the Legion of Mary is the true devotion of St. Louis de Montfort. To the many bonds of union that the Legion recommends to all its members, the true devotion adds just one more. And I asked Frida Coyne, who is one of the Legion of Mary's envoys to Ecuador, what the true devotion to the nation meant to her.
Yes, well, we found particularly that in Ecuador, where I was envoy, working with another young legionary, Anne Bambrick, we found it very necessary to bring into play this true devotion to the nation. In other words, that we would try and uplift society, thinking in terms of the man as a whole, both soul and body. And whilst we would dedicate ourselves to actually developing social works, we would never lose sight of the fact that, again, we must try through these opportunities to develop the man spiritually as well.
Well, Frida, with you, you have Anne Bambrick, and you've just come back also from Ecuador.
Yes.
And you're a member of Voluntary Christi. What is that exactly?
Voluntary Christi is a movement that grew out of the Legion of Mary project of Peregrinatio pro Cristo. It's a movement that helps lay people and prepares them for work in foreign countries, professional people or non-professional people.
The spirit of any organization is difficult to grasp. To get to the real meaning of the spirit of the Legion of Mary demands a deeper effort than most of us in the whirl of daily activity are prepared to make. What is it all about?
Well, it's about a group of men decided to get together and start off I won't say a club, but a thing that will do a lady's work for her. That she always wants to be done here.
What's Our Lady's work?
To help people. And tried to respect other people and help them.
Did you always think that of the Legion?
No, I always thought it was just praying all the time.
To John and the other children who are members of this club, the Legion of Mary is perhaps a refuge in itself. What do you come here for?
Physical training and games.
How did you first hear about the Legion?
There was people going around the area in which I lived and asked me to join, so I just tried it out and got interested, and then I got interested in the club. Yes.
Do you have to be a member of the Legion before you can come into the club here?
No.
You can just come in and...
Yes.
And you have somebody with you, I don't know your name. Robert, what sort of things do you do here? What sort of activities?
PT, physical training and all that stuff.
If you weren't in here, what would you be doing?
Nothing, messing around.
What do you call messing around?
Just around the street. Nothing else, just best place to come.
What do you think of the Legion? If somebody came up to you and said that they were a member of the Legion of Mary, what would you immediately think of them?
It's just an ordinary person to me, They're the same as anyone else.
Do you think they're particularly good living or better than the average person?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah. I'd say there's more to do, There's more to do than anyone else. So, naturally they're going to be better, I'd say.
When you're the right age, I don't know if you are the right age yet, or you to join the Legion?
No, not the senior Legion.
Well, when you are the right age, do you think you will be a member of the
Legion? Yeah, I think so, yeah.
What attracts you to it?
Oh, well, it's part of the club, and I think I'd like to walk with the Legion, around.
Yeah.
That stuff.
If you weren't here tonight, where would you be?
Around the street. Well, in my house now, but during the night, early night, I'd be in the street.
What age are you?
15.
And what would you be doing in the street?
Might go off with my friends or have a game of football or something like that.
Yes. And so while you're in here, you're doing PT, is it?
Yes.
What did your friends, your other friends who are not in the club, what did they think of you when you said you were going to the Legion Club?
Some of them might just laugh, thinking it's a sissy boy or something,
Why do you think they think that?
Well, they think you're praying all the time, you're on your knees all the time.
And are you?
No, far from it. So sometimes you're helping in the club and you're enjoying yourself most of the time.
What do your parents think of you being in the Legion Club?
They think it's great. They like to mix with young kids. And it keeps you off the street, out of trouble.
Out of trouble? What sort of trouble would you be in?
You might get into bad company and go off and do something and get into trouble with the police.
This keeps you away from it?
Yes.
Do you ever go up to any of your friends who are not in the Legion and ask them to come along with you?
Yes, a good few times.
And what do they say to you?
Sometimes they come. Sometimes they just say they're going off somewhere.
And you can bring anyone you like in here, can you?
Well, if they're the right age.
What age is that?
Over 12 or 11 or 12. They have to be over 12. But to join the Legion, they have to be over 7.
Visiting the sick is another form of apostolic help, willingly given by the Legion of Mary.
I was always interested in doing apostolic work, but I didn't know how to go about it. And so I joined, and for first 3 months perhaps I did find it a little difficult, the discipline and everything. But after that I got the idea of the Legion, and I seemed to understand the spirit of it. And now I've been in the Legion for 7 years, and I must say I love it.
How would you describe to me the spirit of it?
The spirit of the Legion, is the spirit of Our Lady herself, we try and copy Our Lady's virtues, and we try and see her Son Christ in everybody we visit. It's a deeply spiritual organization, The idea is to bring everybody nearer to God and to bring all souls to Christ all over the world.
Now, you visit the Royal Hospital for Incurables.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
What sort of reaction do you get from people who have a very great deal of suffering anyway to deal with, and perhaps they then have some spiritual suffering as well? How do they react when you talk about the Legion to them, or when you talk about the spirit of the Legion?
Well, we've made great friends with these patients in the Royal Hospital. We visit them
As you know, in the Legion we cannot give material relief. We don't bring them sweets or chocolates or anything, but we just bring them our friendship and our love, and we bring it in a great measure. And we find if we're really interested in them, they trust us, and they can tell us all their sorrows and their troubles. You must listen to people, not talk too much. We find that. And we find we can help them, and as a matter of fact, they can help us too. There's always give and take in the spiritual world, I think. And we have found that we've helped them spiritually to bear their sufferings.
For those in the Legion of Mary who give so much, so unselfishly, even on this earth, there seems to be a reward.
Yes, well, I realise that the Legion has done more for me than I have done for the Legion.
In what way, Miss Rowe?
Well, in the amount of knowledge I have there got, particularly the knowledge of Our Lady, because we get so much about Our Lady that it gives us an extraordinary devotion to Our Lady, which I don't think I would have had if I hadn't been associated with the Legion of Mary. Mm-hmm. And it also gives you a tremendous love for people who would be outcast. Normally I might be like ordinary people, pass them by, but it gives you a great sense of your anxiety to do something for them. But I would say that the spiritual advantage gained through membership of the Legion is greater than what you have given to the Legion.
On September the 5th, 1921, the harrowing stories of the loneliness and spiritual desolation of some of the patients of the South Dublin Union led naturally to the provision of a different kind of service. Today, 50 years later, these needs are greater than ever. Only today, they are not confined to the South Dublin Union. But what is it about the legionaries which gives them the strength to carry on work which at times seems so impossible? Perhaps their secret is that they are and will remain souls on fire with active love for the Mary for whom their gentle army has been called. But what does seem certain is that by them a special meaning has been given to that most unselfish response of all, be it done to me according to thy word.